Welcome, everybody, to the Scale Up Show. This is your host, Ryan Staley, and I have a very special guest with me today. I have Jason Smith. Jason is the CEO and co-founder at Klue with a K, right? Jason is a five-time entrepreneur. Previously was a VP of Special Project at EA Sports, president of Vision Critical, which is now called Alita, where he grew the company from startup to 50 million. On top of it, too, like starting 5 companies or being a five-time entrepreneur isn't enough. Decided to take a leap year. Is it a leap year or off year, right? Where he took his kids around the world with his wife for a round the world trip. Jason, welcome. Happy to have you on the show, man. Sorry, it was a bit of a mouthful that I was trying to get in there at the end, but like that's so impressive. That's why I stumbled over it a little bit.
All good. Happy to be here, Ryan. And yeah, we could talk about the round the world trip all you want. That's probably more fun than the business stuff.
Well, we probably I imagine we're going to get into that in the episode because that's uncommonly done but very commonly talked about, right? And so one of the cool things is you have an AI powered competitive intelligence platform. So we'll talk about that too because AI is kind of hot. So real quick before we do that, let's do a revenue rundown. So where are you guys at in terms of the journey in terms of your ARR?
Right on the spot, hey, of ARR of a private company. I'll give you the range into we're well into double digits ARR.
I'm not gonna like hump your leg for it. This is just so people have an understanding of like where you're at in the journey in terms of stages. That's all.
Ryan, I love it. It's like every VC call I've had where they keep asking, and I try and find the way to kind of avoid it. But yeah, no, look, we've been lucky in doing the kind of the triple, double approach to kind of growing the business and having funding rounds. So well into the double-digit ARR with about 500 clients now at Klue.
Okay, fantastic. And then like, how big is your team right now currently?
250 people spread across multiple offices around the world. We just acquired a company out of Boston called Double Check Research that does win-loss interviews. It's a services company that we're productizing. So that'll be product number 2 in the Klue kit, where we're now offering kind of an integrated platform that does compete and buyer insights. So that's kind of exciting. That added about 30 people. So wow, 250 people in total.
Love the fact that you took a single product and grew it as big as you did. Like not a lot of companies have the discipline to do that. So it's refreshing to hear. And it's let me put it this way. It sounds like you have a master's in discipline for doing that.
You know, one of the things, and once you've got I've got a lot of scars at 5-time. I've screwed up more than most, and you know, I keep screwing up, and hopefully it's just not the same screw ups. But I think one thing that you learn early in building businesses is focus. There are so many different opportunities that you can chase. Many look spectacularly dazzling for you to chase. And the key is to focus your knitting and have something that you continue to execute on. Certainly with Klue as an example, like it was around competitive. And when we started, everyone said, yeah, I get competitive. That's a tiny little category. Not sure how many people care. And so I focused on that and started to dial it into something that now I think is slowly becoming part of the go-to-market stack for a lot of companies. Everyone has competitors. Everyone wants to know about those competitors. It's just a question of how much time they're going to spend, how much money they're going to spend. But, you know, it harkens back to a lesson that Bezos had at Amazon. Like, how long was Amazon known as a bookstore? They weren't building a bookstore. They were building something much better, but they focused on being a bookstore for a long time, dialing in logistics, dialing in their e-commerce engine, dialing in, frankly, the precursor to AWS. So those are good lessons. Is stay to your knitting, keep your focus, build the niche that you need, and then we can expand from there.
Love that. Yeah, that's sage advice. So real sage advice. So talk to us about Klue. Like exactly, can you give us like a couple sentence summary of what it does and who it serves, just so
sure.
the listener have context?
Yeah, without being too pitchy, the high level is like this is competitive enablement. So we try and collect as much intel as we can about your competitors, about your market, external to your organization and internal. So think like Slack, recorded calls, Gong, CRM notes, emails, that kind of thing. Combine that all to try and make sense of it, give you a lens about what your competitors and market are doing. We leverage product marketers internally to help contextualize the intel that we do find. They convert it into insight that ideally is sales ready to help salespeople win the competitive deals they should have won.
Love that. Very succinct. So is it the entire sales market? Or are you particularly focused on the top end of the market? because of deal size, or what's kind of like your TAM, if you will?
Yeah, it's interesting. Sticking to our knitting, we started very much. So Dell was one of our early clients that was gearing us to enterprise very early on. We had about 100 users that then grew into now many tens of thousands of users.
Wow.
So that got us down the enterprise path. I'd say the majority of our clients are in that enterprise state. And so down the SOC 2 compliance, multi-level permissions, SSO integration very early. So all of the usual stuff that you need to do to appeal to enterprise, and even some initial onboarding and services handholding to make sure that it's successful. So, but we have competitors in our category, and they were a little further downstream. So they started at the I wouldn't call it SMB end of the market, but certainly kind of 100-person company level, maybe 100 to 500. So they were starting to get strong there. So that brought us down the market. So I'd say we have growth as one category, kind of call it 100 to 500 employee companies. We have commercial, next segment, 500 to about 5,000. And then probably more than half now in enterprise, which is 5,000 plus employees.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense. How big do you think? It's really interesting because enterprise is always like the way it's described is in the eye of the beholder. Like I can't tell you how many different definitions of enterprise I've heard for that. So you started there. Was that like? And I know you have funding, right? Or you're a backed organization. You had your Series B in 21, right? I guess was that like was that a big barrier with like going up to the enterprise with all the requirements with SOC compliance and things like that
Yeah.
to get moving, or like what are some scars you could tell us about that? Because there's massive amounts of tools that are being dropped right now in companies that are created. However, there's still that enterprise cost barrier, I think, that exists. But love to hear your take on it.
Enterprise is tough out of the gate when you're a 4-person startup, no question. You're not going to be SOC 2 compliant. You're not going to have all the features they need. So the enterprise learning for me is you need to find the rogue innovator that's willing to take a shot, whether they're betting their career on something, whether they're frustrated with something inside the enterprise that they need some influence over a small company, which is a delicate balance. We can talk all about that, how much the tail should wag the dog. But in our case, it was finding somebody that believed in what we were doing in a couple large enterprises that said, this is unique. This is a lens. This is something that we need to do. We don't have a solution. We have an internally baked solution that's costing us a lot of time. Let's see if we could actually co-build basically something with this company. So that's the reality. And in our early days, everything from getting paid was like trying to avoid procurement and credit carding level stuff, in the early days with those wonderfully rogue, innovative buyers that we had. And then there's a certain point where you can't run around the enterprise, and you do have to buck up and spend the money on having legal put together the right contract, getting the right level of insurance, and doing those level of costs. So again, it's like we bounced around finding enough innovators early on to get us enough ARR that could get us a level of funding, that could get us a level of legal support, SOC 2 level. We didn't do SOC 2 right out of the gates, but permissions and some of the other features that were required. So it's a stage, it's a stepping, game. And, again, key advice, you're going to poke around the enterprise and you are going to find people that want to take a risk and will know how to navigate the labyrinth and the hairball and figure out how to get you in there, get you rolling. And then of course you can, it's really the other challenge, Ryan, that, it's really difficult to leverage that enterprise name publicly. They're not going to give you approval to put a big case study and a logo anywhere. So you're either roguing that and taking the risk of losing that client relationship, which we didn't do. Or you're kind of doing kind of the hush permission, which is on a per call basis. We're sales led, not product led. So
Right.
we could in our demos talk about at a high level some of the work that we're doing with a very large company that is X many employees. It's in this space, and then that leads to another potential innovative risk taker, and then you build from there.
Right. Exactly. And then you can do the rhymes with, right? Rhymes with this word, sounds like this word,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So okay, so that that makes a lot of sense. I guess like what do you think like is under the enterprise categorization radar in terms of spend that companies could get away with? without being SOC 2 compliant? And I'm just curious now. I had no idea I was going to ask you this question, but now I'm just
Yeah,
curious
it's an
what we're
interesting one.
talking about.
So, so like there is kind of a magic number of 10K that I've been encountering my entire life of roughly there's, manager level approvals that can happen for an under 10K annual spend without needing to go up the level. Look, in enterprise, it's getting tighter and tighter. Like procurement, security, IT, compliance are all over everything. So I think what we got away with, 6-7 years ago is not what we could get away with today. It's getting tighter, particularly with Gen AI and the question of data and who can use the data and how can do it. So, but I think, yeah, you like we were way less concerned about the money in the early days, and we certainly weren't charging those early apostle big clients what we, wanted to charge in the market. So, but yeah, I don't know if I had to pick a number, it'd be the 9999 under 10K.
9999. Love that. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about how you decided, like why and how you decided to take a year off and just be like, F it, we're going around the world. I'm taking my family. Let's do this. Go.
Building businesses is not easy. It's time consuming. It's an all-in exposure. And so for me, it was a very personal move. So 7 years into building Vision Critical, 0 to 500 employees, now called Alita. And it was a wonderful experience, but also taxing. And I had kids born at the beginning of that journey. And I was looking at pictures of them at 7 and 8 years old and thinking, I have missed a lot of bed tuck-ins. And for me, I'm a very binary person. There's probably a lot of people listening to this that are binary. You're all in on whatever you do. And so I recognize that it's going to be very difficult for me to kind of be all in on a week vacation. So my binary approach to it was rent your house, buy around the world plane tickets, resign, and then try to do a life-changing, foundation building family experience that reconnected me with my family.
Yeah, I think a great move, man. And props to you. What was your favorite moment? It's hard to break it down. Maybe experience probably be a better question. What was your favorite experience on the trip around the world?
That's a fun one. That's a fun one. I'll give you two perspectives. I'll give you my own. So like people often ask, where would you go for 2 weeks? And, countries like Turkey and Peru are, full of amazing experiences that I didn't expect, including like paragliding over the Blue Lagoon in
Nice.
Turkey. And that was frightful because they don't have the same regulations as we do in the US and elsewhere.
It's like going bungee cording to Mexico, it's like the same threshold of safety. So
it did feel a bit like that. Am I going to get any training? No, 3, 2, 1, run. You're in the air. That was a moment. But one of the interesting ones was one of my children that a month in, we were having dinner in some foreign bizarre market, and she looked over at us and said, "Okay, I get it." And we're like, what do you mean you get it? And she said, I get it. I know now why we're on this trip. You wanted me to understand how well we have it at home and all the special privilege that we have. And of course, that was part of it. I wanted to show my kids the world and get some exposure to a life that others have, that they had access to some level of privilege. And just to hear her, and then literally she's like, can we go home now? You've proven it. And it was this moment of, yeah, no, we've got another 11 months to go here. But it is.
month one. That was on month one.
That was literally month one. I'm missing all my friends. What have you done? You've taken me away. We're in this foreign land. I'm hearing the call to prayer 5 times. I don't even know what that is. And just this like foreign exposure overload that was like, okay, I get it. We have a lot of privilege at home. Can we go back now? So that was just a fun, insightful moment. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's so funny. And it was a month in. And how old was how old were your kids when you took them on the trip?
Yeah, they were 8 and 9 by the time we did it. Yeah.
Okay. Good timing. How old are they now?
They're grown up, so they're 10 years later. So
wow,
I did that
10 years ago. Okay.
I did that when I was 40. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, cool, man. Love that. That's so wild. Right. Hey, so props to you for raising your kids the right way, that they realize that a month in, but not props to you for having to deal with that for the next 11 months. I guess that's the downside of it. Right. So
it's a very enlightening thing to do. So like we blow through life very quickly, and it's the stream that carries us. And I think it's hard to take an eddy out of the stream and try and think about a reapproach, reframe to what you're doing. So for me as an entrepreneur, there are natural cycles. You start, you end, and whether they're successful or not, there's a start and an end, and you're looking and thinking about what your next thing is. And so I'm privileged in that way. So this was an opportunity kind of to end one chapter before I started the next one, regroup mentally and understand it. So I was on this trip and I had 17 different ideas. And what I would do is, as a new idea would emerge, I'd write it down. I think it was brilliant in the moment. I'll laugh at myself a year later when I looked at it and saw it in another light. But in the moment, you're writing it down, and these are problems that you're looking at potentially solving to start a business. And so when I got back, I started vetting some of those ideas. And when I think about starting a company, advice that I often give is, does it pull on you? Does it continue to pull on you? And it's not a magic thing that is like, this is going to be a huge, business in the beginning. It's just a problem that you're continually running over in your mind and trying to solve. And I have this analogy of 100 smart person meetings. And if you can bounce that idea and truly ask those people on the other side to critique it, please tell me my haircut's ugly. Please tell me my baby is ugly, because I don't want to spend 10 years of my life doing something and if it's not valid. So if you can get through those 100 smart person meetings in a way that creates more conviction for that business idea, you're in and it's off to the races. But each one of those meetings can chip away at your confidence, make you question, is it a good idea or not? And if you find yourself drifting, then, that's where it's not an idea worth pursuing. So that dropped a number of my ideas off the ladder, off the map. And then that's where Klue just kept coming. I just thought the more I looked at the back of the napkin was every company in the world has competitors. There's systems of records for employees and customers, but there really isn't for competitors. And maybe the world needs that.
Yeah, well, obviously you're doing something right, So, congrats on you for sticking with it. Let me ask you this question. This probably weren't even expecting this one. What is one of those, 15 to 17 ideas that fell off that, now knowing what you know today, that would be highly successful?
Oh, okay. You
Maybe
definitely took me down the wrong path there. I thought the ones that I turfed, because I had some really bad ideas in there for sure. Yeah.
I was thinking, who's. Let me put it this way. I mean, and I don't. Maybe it's the woman in the red dress, from the Matrix movies. It's still out there that you're like, hey, you know what? There's still some good opportunity here, and I don't want you to give away your next baby or whatever. But there's probably one that you turf that you're like, hey, that's still legit. Anything that comes to mind as I ask you that question?
Well, legit, yes, because there's companies now doing it and have crushed it. And so one of the areas that I was really keen on was getting a dashboard of understanding of potential churn in your business. So what could it look like from a SaaS standpoint, to figure out the levers that says this is an early indicator that they're going to leave you. And Gainsight has obviously done a wonderful job of creating an entire category around that. And there's many other companies that have kind of followed in their footsteps. So that was an idea back in 2012 that was not well formed, and it was early and nascent. And I thought, this is something that every SaaS company in the world is going to need. So, I was zeroing in on that. And then this is the other thing, like you get surprised with, oh, there's a $20 million funding round. That is going to be hard to compete against if I'm now behind the eight ball. Oh, and they acquired another company. And so those types of things either, again, embolden you or push you back on your journey. And for me, it was, I don't want to get in two things. One, didn't want to get into a race against somebody that was significantly better funded, that had the right idea in terms of how I was thinking about it. I couldn't have differentiated as much. And two, I was trying to look for something broader that wasn't just SaaS selling to SaaS, something that every department, every vertical, every size of company could use. So that's why I navigated away from that one.
Love that. So you work outside of, it sounds like SaaS. SaaS is just a piece of the verticals you work with.
It is, yeah. We have clients in many different verticals: manufacturing, health science, even business consulting. There's many clients. At the end of the day, Ryan, do you have competitors? Like, it's pretty simple.
No, I have no competitors.
No, of course not. Yeah.
It's like saying the answer to that question. The cool thing is, it's like the equivalent. You can use this in your future sales calls if you want, but it's like you're interviewing someone and they're like, well, what's your biggest weakness that you have? They're like, well, I don't really have a biggest weakness, but if I did, it would be because I work too hard. Right? Like, that's like the bullshit answer. I don't want to say bullshit answer, but the inauthentic or non-authentic answer that someone could have, right?
Yeah. All your investors on your pod would really appreciate the no, I don't have any competitors answer to how do you stack up against your competitors? Like it's pretty
I
instant
don't have any.
dismissal. Yeah.
I'm creating a new category, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the new I don't have any
That's right.
competitors type thing. So okay, so one of the things that you talk about is a competitive revenue gap, and I love the
Mm.
concept of it. When we talked through that earlier, can you just kind of identify what that is? Because I think the way that you articulate that and execute the messaging is fantastic. So just walk us through that real quick.
Sure. Yeah, this is I find it a compelling concept. This is the idea that okay, take your pipeline. Any company has a sales pipeline. There's a bunch of opportunities in that pipeline. Getting through that pipeline, you're going to win a bunch of deals. Call it 20%. You're going to win. Let's say you have a $500 million pipeline. 50%, you're going to no decision. And then there's like 30%. So 150 million that you lost directly to competitors. Now, these are people that had budget, looked at you, looked at alternatives. They just picked someone else, different dance partner. That 150 million is the competitive revenue gap. And so I think you identify that kind of piece, that loss. And then there's a question of which deals within there could you have actually won? Well, the one that was connected, the deals where your competitor has a relationship and their uncle is their CEO, well, they're a little more challenging, but there's a bunch that you should have won. So that's what, I think companies like ours and others in the space are trying to focus on. How do you narrow that competitive revenue gap? If there are deals that you should have won, how do you win them? And there's a lot of CROs being dragged into board meetings today where they're being asked to say, how do you get more sales efficient? You're spending a lot on sales and marketing and it's not that efficient. And I think one of the fastest paths there is just saying, well, you've got deals in your pipeline where the competitor has beat you, outmaneuvered you. Identify those competitors earlier in the deal, deposition them earlier, navigate around them, and mitigate them. And so there's a direct correlation to kind of winning those competitive deals. But then there's other subtleties, which is if you do a good job of mitigating your competitor early in her deal, you're likely going to discount less at the 11th hour. It's not now a bake-off at the 11th hour. You guys look the same, and I could pick either of you who's going to give me a better price.
Right.
If you built your value prop earlier, you're discounting less. So deal sizes are bigger. And then often deal duration is lower. So there's kind of three variables that we look at when you say identify that gap, and then let's just progressively, systematically go through and narrow it on a quarter by quarter basis. You got deals in your pipeline right now with competitors in them. What are your reps saying? How do we level up the reps that usually get beat by those competitors so that they're like your other reps that crush those competitors? Give them the talk tracks, understand which competitors are in a deal, and have them win more of the deals they should have won.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much gold in what you said right there. Some diamonds in there as well. And I think, one of the things that makes sense to me is like if you do that, and I like the term deposition the competitor at the beginning of the sales process, because like if you do that, there's a couple things, right? You can either set landmines or create landmines for them to step on by just coaching the prospect on the right questions to ask, or like if you know enough about it, like we used to have it down to we knew how the competitors were comped, like how the reps were compensated, and because of the way that that compensation model was designed, it caused the reps to propose solutions that weren't always in the best interest of the customer. Right. So like you could get down to that level of detail if you truly understand your competition. And so I think you're onto something huge there, because there was no systemization for that or any tools or systems, back in the day. And even I think there's much more market too, because your solution's unknown and there's a lot of opportunity there. So you're definitely honest.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's I think you just hit on something really valid. It's just like the knowledge of what they're doing at an intimate level, at every level, gives you and your reps confidence. So you walk in with an educated prospect who's talked to your competitors and you know what they're going to say. You know how they're going to maneuver. And so you're much more confident in the deal. But the other piece that I hearken on or I focus on is trust. You create trust with your prospect when you can elegantly talk about your market and your competitors and what they're going to hear from the competitor on the next call when they talk to them. And if you can be kind of in advance of that, and then the competitor walks into you and does exactly what you're doing, they're going to discount 50% right off the bat, and they're going to try and win you on price. And if that's it, then we're not the player for you. Like that's if you're telling them that, then that happens. And then that prospect comes back to you and says, you know what, they did exactly that. And there's this trust that builds. And so
Hmm.
now everything you say from there is more believable. And I think deals are won and lost on some of these like pieces of trust. Equally so, if you go in and you bash your competitors and say a bunch of things that are no longer true. They can't do this and they can't do that. They have no Gen AI built in their platform. And then literally that prospect gets a demo of their new Gen AI.
Yeah.
You look like an idiot. And so does that help you in your deal or does it mitigate trust? And deals are not won and lost by this wide margin. If we do win loss for a lot of our clients now, we go literally interview a bunch of clients or deals that they lost or won, and we try and understand why they won or lost, right? So in that, we understand that people are like, it was a margin of like 3% that tipped them from going from one company to the next. And so many deals are that little margin of
Oh yeah.
tipping one way or the other. And so, like, that is the difference between a highly efficient sales team and an inefficient sales team, winning those little margins.
Yeah. I mean, we lost a $18 million deal because there was 30 people involved in the sales process, and we did not have access to one person in there because we didn't ask one solid question earlier in the process. We made an assumption, right? And now, granted, it was a great learning experience because we turned around and then got a $20 million deal from Amazon cold after that. So, or I should say from a referral after that. But we leveraged everything that, that one piece that we messed up on and then never forgot that again. So you're right. It is a game of inches. I mean, being the first loser on a deal like that sucks, especially when it's an RFP process and there's that many people involved because there's so much wasted time.
Oh
So,
my gosh. I can relate to that. And I'm sure there's so many listeners
oh,
cringing, going, oh, that deal that I
just
missed.
dry
Right.
heaving,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and this is
Ugh.
like when I look at it, there's so many things that layer up and add up to like how good is your rep? How much the enablement works? Like how are you pricing? What's your product? There's a bunch of things. Like all we focus on is the competitive piece. It's
Yeah.
just understanding who they are, navigating around that. So we're one ingredient of many, but we're a really critical one in that tipping of the competitive deals. But there's so many other things, Ryan, that you're hitting on there. That one EDM that you didn't get to talk to that was the one.
Yeah. It's crazy. Well, here I'll give you the question because this often comes up. Because the question, I'll never make the mistake. So it was a solution that basically was consolidating different budgets and piecemeal solutions into one. And so we understood who owned the budget, and we understand who owned the budget afterwards, but we didn't understand who would be responsible for managing the program afterwards, right? We understood who managed it now, but not after the transformation was made. And then the other vendor cozied up to them, and the person in the room that's like, no, this one's better. It was that 1%, 2% difference that equaled 100%, right? So, anyways, soul crushing blow that cost, my rep and myself at the time probably $500,000. No big deal, whatever, just minor details. So, anyways, let's shift gears a little bit because I know we're almost up on time. What would you say is the single biggest challenge you have in growing the business right now? Because you're doing very well organically, and so we'd love to hear like what's the biggest challenge because nothing goes perfect.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we managed to raise, our funding at the right time, and we've been a highly capital efficient company. So we're in this position where we can ignore the capital and the funding markets and have the money to invest. So one of the biggest challenges when you have that is what to invest in, where to spend your money, and also like to figure out where to cost cut as well. So you're doing both. You're thinking about investment and you're also making sure that you're staying capital efficient. So I think that line is a really tricky line, and also communicating to 250 people why you're spending money on building this new product and hiring more engineers while you're pulling back on marketing budget in a particular tech vertical that might be in a bit of a headwind moment, and spending on the manufacturing vertical or another vertical that proves more promising. I think communication of that and selection of what you're investing in versus what you're cutting is right now in 2023, when you're tech selling to tech, is one of the hardest lines to find. It's a bit like if you want to buy that bike or that car or go on that vacation, you need to sacrifice a bunch of Uber Eats and the Starbucks every morning. Like, so you're cheap because you're sacrificing Uber Eats, but you're investing in putting that money into
Maybe it's
something you
something
really
else.
care
Yeah.
about. And I think that's a delicate balance. I think for a lot of SaaS companies, it certainly is for us. And connected to that is just focus of there are so many opportunities for us right now. There's companies that are struggling that represent acquisition targets that we could play a role in. There's new categories of information and products and software that we might be able to venture into. Do we do that? And then see canons of the companies that are in that category start to get pointed to us. And so I think focus again, back to kind of the original premise. We're still any startup that is losing money is still a startup, and we are in that process of growing into a predictable growth, hopefully profitable one day company, and focus remains one of the core issues.
Wow. Well, that's great feedback and makes a lot of sense. It sounds like you're in a great position though, like compared to a lot of other organizations that I've spoken to. So unfortunately we're up on time. So where can people find out more about you, Jason Smith, and where can they find out more about Klue with the K?
Yeah, appreciate the Klue with a K. Yeah, so Klue.com. Yeah, we've got a lot of resources there. If you're interested in competitive at all, we've got a lot of resources that we can provide to folks that are free, and you can use that. You don't need Klue software. You've got a lot of free ones. So check that out. And then on LinkedIn, you can just look for Jason Smith and Klue with a K, and we can connect or follow me there.
Klue with the K. Say that all the time, right? You're good. All right, Jason. Well, it was a pleasure having you on the show, man. It was a ton of fun. Love hearing about your journey, everything that you've done, where you're going, and the utility of your product, man. I could imagine probably 15 different use cases for it. So
Appreciate being here, Ryan. Thank you.
all right. Well, and thank you for listening. I appreciate you being on the show with us. We'll see you on the next episode.